We don't usually stop to wonder where it all began, but to understand milk, truly understand it, we have to go back, way back. Not to supermarkets or even old dairies, but to a place long before the first cities. It started in the Fertile Crescent, in what we now call Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, over 10,000 years ago. There, humans did something extraordinary. They didn't just hunt animals, they brought them home, tamed them, and lived with them. The first humans didn't drink milk. They turned it into cheese, yogurt, butter, foods their bodies could handle, long before milk became a drink. This transformation wasn't just clever, it was survival. For most of human history, adults couldn't digest milk. Fermentation was the hack, a biological problem solved with ancient tech. That first sip of milk, it wasn't just a drink, it was the result of evolution's slow experiment. A genetic mutation spreading northward across Europe, turning milk into nourishment, not nausea. While the old world was forging its bond with milk, the Americas stood apart, an entire continent without cows, without cheese, without milk. The only possible milk givers? Llamas and alpacas. But they weren't milked. They were beasts of burden, treasured for meat and prized for their wool. The overwhelming consensus? A true dairy culture never took root here. Before 1.82, the Americas weren't just unfamiliar with milk. They were biologically, culturally, and ecologically unprepared for it. The transformation of the Americas began in 1493, not with a flag, but with livestock. On his second voyage, Christopher Columbus brought more than conquest. Aboard his ships were cattle, and with them came milk, a foreign fluid that would reshape a continent. Cattle spread like settlers, symbols of empire, reshaping the land in Europe's image. Further north, a similar, though distinct, invasion was underway, and dairying quickly became essential, a cornerstone of the household economy. And the work? It was women's work, unseen but indispensable. Cattle didn't come alone, they brought an entire system. They were agents of conquest, reshaping a continent. As American settlers pushed westward, they brought cows into wild, unfamiliar lands. But with them came a hidden threat, milk sickness, a deadly toxin passed through milk. Its most famous victim, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's mother. The culprit, white snake root, a wild plant laced with trematol, a toxin that turned milk into poison. The cure didn't come from science, but from the frontier. Dr. Anna Bixby, guided by a Shawnee healer, uncovered the truth behind the poison. Despite her breakthrough, Anna Bixby's discovery was dismissed, ignored by a medical world that didn't listen to women. While pioneers battled nature's toxins, a man-made poison was rising in America's cities. Hidden in alleyways and tenements, the Swill Dairy, a factory of filth, masquerading as a source of milk. What came out wasn't milk, but a thin, bluish, foul-smelling liquid. To sell it, vendors doctored it with chalk, starch, and plaster. A grotesque brew passed off as nourishment. America's first flu crisis, Swill Milk, exposed in 1858 by Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper. Even with the truth exposed, reform was slow. The distillers were rich and deeply connected. The first real breakthrough came from Gail Borden, a man obsessed with preservation. His inspiration, the Shakers, masters of order, purity, and shelf life. Borden's process was simple but revolutionary, heated milk in a vacuum. The result, patented in 1856, condensed milk. The Union Army took notice, placing massive orders. Borden's condensed milk became a battlefield staple fueling the Union soldiers' march. The next breakthrough rode the rails, America's growing railway network. With it came dedicated milk trains rushing fresh milk from farm to city before it could spoil. The third pillar was policy, the Homestead Act of 1862. It seeded the land with small farms, creating a vast, decentralized web of milk producers across the frontier. When production, transportation, and preservation finally converged, milk was no longer fragile. It became safe, reliable, and ready to travel, an industrial commodity sealed in steel and certainty. As the 20th century dawned, one silent threat still lingered, the microbe. Milk had become modern, but it was still dangerous, a carrier of deadly diseases in every unclean sip. Philanthropists like Nathan Strauss stepped in with a solution, opening milk depots to offer safe, pasteurized milk to the city's poorest families. but the call for mandatory pasteurization sparked fierce resistance, a clash of science, tradition, and competing visions of purity and control. The results were immediate and impossible to ignore. Infant mortality plummeted. Pasteurization didn't just save lives, it redefined what milk was. The crises of the early 20th century did more than change milk. They forged a powerful alliance, a lasting bond between the dairy industry and the federal government. It began in World War I, milk as wartime necessity. But a decade later, the Great Depression hit hard, crippling farmers and shaking the foundation of American agriculture. In one of the most haunting images of the Great Depression, farmers, crushed by collapsing prices, stood beside ditches and fields and poured out entire vats of milk. Perfectly good, painfully wasted. But this wasn't waste. It was rebellion, a silent, desperate protest against a system that no longer valued their labor or their survival. In response, Roosevelt's New Deal created the Commodity Credit Corporation, and with it, milk gained new status, not just food, but a strategic national resource. It was elevated to a strategic resource, backed by the full power of the federal government. The alliance reached almost surreal heights as the government stockpiled massive cheese reserves, filling underground caves with mountains of processed surplus. Milk had become myth, stored like gold beneath the earth. By the early 1980s, the dairy surplus had reached a breaking point. President Ronald Reagan took the stage with a simple solution: give the cheese away. Tons of it, to anyone who needed it. At the same time, the government turned to demand. Milk became mandatory, a required part of every subsidized school meal, served daily to millions of children across the nation. These policies built a perfect loop: taxpayer, farmer, and consumer all locked in together, a self-sustaining system with no clear exit and milk at its center. And so, in the belly of a Missouri cave, beneath layers of limestone and politics, the American government buried its dairy dreams in 5-pound bricks of processed cheese. It became a monument to a century of milk-made promises, of nourishment, of nationalism, of an economy lashed to the teat. But by the time that cheese reached the hands of struggling families in Reagan's America, it no longer tasted like triumph. It was survival food, wrapped in bureaucracy, a symbol not just of abundance, but of a system bloated by its own success. Milk had fed soldiers, students, infants. But it had also fed empires, industries, ideologies, and now, for the first time, it faced a quiet rebellion.